Hello, grade 12 scholars, and welcome back. We are now ready to start lesson 40 in week 9 of your ELA Distance Learning. And we are ready for our favorite video rundown. So we know that each video is going to be a little bit different, but there are a few constants. For example, I'm always going to provide you with materials and resources you'll need. We'll move through an overview of the learning for that day. Modeling will always take center stage, especially as it relates to the writing task or close reading effort. And lastly, we'll preview the next day's learning. We are now on day 2 of this week. We will still be reading the article Military Bases Build Communities, Support Families. And I know that we finished our first read yesterday and dug a little deeper with some close reading, but today we will also reread the text. We'll annotate and answer some questions about a different topic present. Today's video link is ELA G12W9L40. Let's get started. A few quick reminders, as always, before we launch into our learning. The first one is make sure that even ahead of today's lesson that you're planning on sharing your learning with someone else. Of course, we're completing our weekly fluency practice. Again, if you need that additional guidance, look at those first couple of pages in your packet. And of course, that 20 minutes of independent reading. Hopefully, by this point, your reading is a habit, so you might even lose track of time. Keep these items in mind and on deck for when we finish today's lesson. And here we are, a little bit of fun to start today's learning, right? This is a pictogram puzzle. I want you to take a look at the letters on the screen and try to think about what words or phrases pop in your head. Take 15 seconds here, pause the video, or if you're a genius and are able to recognize it right from the start, shout it out loud. I'm going to reveal the answer to this difficult, I'll say, pictogram puzzle in the next slide. Yep, I missed this one. Took me a minute and finally I was like, oh, okay. Well, in any case, I hope you got it. Even if you didn't, know that there are plenty more opportunities today to flex that am I right muscle. Let's get going. Here are the materials and resources that you'll need to make your way through today's lesson. Lesson 40 is on page 129 of your learning packet. No catcher, not surprisingly, page 130. The text is still on pages 124 to 126. And of course, you'll need something to write with and something to highlight with. If you're smart about it, right? Gather these materials together, pause the video if you need to, so that we can begin our learning today. A quick refresher of what helps guide our reading. First of all, I just want to make mention that this article, entitled Military Bases Build Communities, Support Families, was actually featured in the Los Angeles Times. A very publicized publication, right? Makes sense. What I want us to keep in mind is the essential question as we're reading. What does it mean to call a place home? Is it more than just the physical structure around us? It's especially relevant because in this article, we're looking into a whole community, right? Our guiding questions, also important to keep in mind, are what makes a place important enough to write about? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? We will definitely see relevance in these questions as we continue our reading. The learning target for today's lesson is, I can identify and evaluate evidence in a text to support a claim. I think some writing is ahead of us. Let's see. Now for an overview of our learning for the day. You'll start by reading the text, actually rereading the text, and trying to lift up pieces of evidence to support the author's claim about how military life inside of Camp Pendleton is a bit different. After that, you're going to be lifting up these pieces of evidence and notes in your margins to then think about the following question. Which statistics, anecdotes, which are personal stories, right, or personal accounts, or quotes that you underlined, which of those help give you the clearest picture of military life? Next, you're going to discuss with someone the following question. How connected is Camp Pendleton, or the community of Camp Pendleton, to the outside world, or more specifically, the communities that surround it? Last, you're going to be writing a lot to some really thought-provoking questions, but also questions that give you the opportunity to showcase your understanding of the article and provide some insight. And of course, closing, you'll always be making time to read. I happen to do my independent reading right after these lessons. I don't know about you, but make sure that you make some time for those closing efforts. So today, you'll be rereading the text at least once. And as you read, I want you to look for the evidence the author uses to describe the nature of military life. And what I mean by that is how military life actually is. I want you to be able to mark the statistics, anecdotes, which are personal accounts or stories, and quotations. Try to mark all three. Then I want you to think about the following claim. Camp Pendleton is well connected with the surrounding community. Your next step then is to mark evidence in the text that supports this claim. And after that, mark evidence that the author uses against this claim, because both are present. Before you get started on your independent efforts, I'm going to provide you with a quick model of this close reading exercise. For our model, I'm going to look at the second page of the article. I'm going to read these couple of paragraphs, and then I'm going to explain to you why I lifted up this particular quote. So to start, we build communities just like the neighborhoods outside of the camp, said Robert Marshall, Director of Family Housing. Just because the Marines are on duty doesn't mean their families have to be as well. Let's tack on this little other part. That considered approach reflects a growing trend in the military. Provide for the families as well as the warriors. Now, why I decided to lift up this quote, because it gives us insight as to why the military dedicates time and spends a fair amount of money into building these bases that have a wide variety of amenities. And amenities are things that we need to make our lives easier, more enjoyable, more reflective of everyday life, right? So I want you to think about this process as you move through the article in your analysis, lifting up quotes, statistics, anecdotes, which are personal stories or accounts, and lift up what type of insight they give you into military life. Pause the video and take some time to do this now. Welcome back from those close reading efforts. Now that you've finished your close reading, go back and review the evidence that you underlined. Remember, quotes, statistics, anecdotes. And I want you to put a star next to that piece of information that gives you the clearest picture of military life. Pause the video to do this step now. And now it's time for you to discuss. So remember, you had marked evidence for and against the claim that Camp Pendleton is well connected to the surrounding community. I happen to mark mine with for, meaning plus, against with a minus in different colors. I want you to use this evidence that you marked to decide how connected you feel the camp is. Use some of the evidence that you lifted up in a conversation with someone at home, a friend, or even a classmate, especially because they read the same article. Pause the video and take some time to do that now. And now it's time for your daily writing. As mentioned before, you have a few questions to answer in your note catcher, but rest assured that all of your answers can be informed by your annotating and your thinking around today's lesson. That's why I can't stress enough, use the notes that you've taken in the margins. Use your insight that you drew from your conversations with others in these answers. Because the first one asks you, how does the author use statistics to describe the nature of military life, right? How he uses anecdotes, how he uses quotes. Remember, you lifted up so many of those. And then the next two questions ask you to pick out evidence that supports that Camp Pendleton is well connected to the surrounding community. And the next question asks you how Camp Pendleton is not well connected to the surrounding community, using evidence to support that. Quick tip, I marked my evidence with a plus for supporting and a minus for going against that claim. Just a little tip that we'll use in the future. Pause the video and take some time to complete this step now. I believe we are moving into lesson 41, so we are in the mid-week rush now. Your learning target for tomorrow is, I can analyze details the author uses to contrast two ideas. A little bit of comparison today, support for and against, so I can really see us feeling pretty confident moving into tomorrow's lesson. Remember, if you have any questions, please reach out to your teacher at theirfirstname.theirlastname@detroitk12.org. I'm sure they'd love to help you through any issues that you might have with today's lesson. And here we are at the end of another great, I can say day because we were only with each other for a short period of time. But it was a great lesson today, so thank you for your participation. Please, before you wrap up your learning for today, make sure that you're talking about today's lesson with someone. Always make sure that you're reading independently for 20 minutes and marking your efforts. And lastly, practice your fluency. Remember, it's not just about reading and comprehending the material, but it's really about the whole reading experience, and fluency practice really helps us dig into that. We'll see you tomorrow for lesson 41.